Both men and women can suffer from the disease of alcoholism. Society just views them differently, which I'll talk about further on. But those differences are just one of the many held about men and women in today's society. I once read a social study that was made with men and women that may help shed a little bit of light on the subject of male-female differences and needs. Each person in that study was asked what they most feared regarding the other sex when they were involved in an intimate relationship. Most of the men questioned said they feared if they let themselves be vulnerable, their women partner might ridicule or laugh at them. Contrast that with the majority of the women. They confessed their biggest fear was that their partner might at some point become angry enough to kill them. Let's let that soak in just for a moment. Okay. With that information in mind, we can return to the subject of recovery from alcoholism for women. I invite you men to stay here too, because you may learn a few things about your sisters in sobriety that you never suspected. While both men and women of every age, race, and profession can become alcoholics, the results of our disease and our fears can impact our lives in very different ways. All drunks are shamed by the society they live in. But until they've reached the lowest point in their drinking, men are perceived as someone who just doesn't know when to quit. Women at that late stage, or a lot earlier, are perceived as pretty much just being bad women. A drunk man staggering along the street is even today often seen as a figure of fun, someone to be laughed at. That funny drunk in the movies or the TV sitcom, pretty much always a man. YouTube also shows drunk women moments, but a woman staggering from drink along a street is still often seen as more disgusting than funny, or is even seen as a viable target for sexual assault. And women alcoholics who live with physical abuse in their homes often turn to the bottle for comfort, thereby inviting a whole new level of verbal abuse too. When regularly told we are terrible mothers, rotten housekeepers, lousy cooks, disgusting, fat, lazy, bitches, whores, dumb, or even worse, we don't walk away from that unscathed. And a woman who finds she cannot stop drinking feels like a shameful failure already. So verbal abuse of that kind just adds to her existing mountain of self-loathing. I've been a member of AA groups in several countries, and in every one of them, there have been women who never spoke. They were always there, they listened, they continued to stay sober, but they never spoke aloud in a meeting. They couldn't. These were women who'd been abused as children by male family members or other men, and later, often when quite young, because of that earlier programming, they went on to marry abusive men. Their voices had been silenced by men all their lives. It was only when these women became members in women's AA groups and came to believe that their thoughts and their feelings had some value worth sharing that they began to finally speak. They were able to find their voice. I've known such women. I have sponsored such women. So I am now, and I always will be, a champion of women's AA groups. Because here's the best news, guys. Once the silent women discover their self-worth inside their women's meetings, they can find the courage then to venture out into regular AA meetings. And with them, they bring a powerful wisdom and a level of compassion that benefits everyone in the full program of recovery. So I believe the most important thing a woman in recovery can do for herself is to join an all-women's meeting, or to start one if necessary. I've helped start 3 of them. 2 of those groups have now faded away, but the one in Savannah, Georgia has been around for more than 35 years now, and it remains a big, healthy group. It has now helped thousands of women find their voice. Women's groups themselves have been around since the 1950s, by the way. So if you're trying to get one started, don't let anyone bully you into thinking it's a new thing. They're not new. Even so, many men in AA still sometimes get annoyed when a local woman decides to form a group just for her, just for them. And they'll give you all kinds of reasons why a woman's group isn't necessary, too. I've heard them all. They'll say a woman alcoholic is no different from a man alcoholic, or that women are dangerously unique when they start thinking that they need their own group. And some men will even be more blunt and say, "What's so damn secret you women can't talk about it in a regular meeting?" I kind of suspect those guys think we want to talk about them, but they can relax. We really, really don't. And I'm not man-bashing. The women in my recovery are vitally important to me, but I adore the men in AA too. Nearly all of the men around me in my early AA meetings were men, and without them I would never have been able to stay sober. The courage, direction, compassion, and humor of those men in my first AA groups propped me up, got me safely through my weakest moments, and I will always remain in their debt. And there are many lovely men in my life in AA today, too, including my Sunday guys, as 3 men I absolutely count on to guide me further along in my own sober journey. But our handy-dandy dictionary states that a fellow is a man or a boy. So today's AA fellowship remains a boys' club. And here are the numbers. If 20 years is a generation and AA was founded in 1935, that makes me an early member of the 3rd generation because I got sober in 1981. And even then, there weren't a lot of women in the rooms of AA because in the 2nd generation, 1955 to 1975, only 15% of the membership were women. Between 1968 and my own arrival, that percentage in much of the USA and Canada rose from 22% to 31%. Today, AA claims an estimated 2.1 million members worldwide, and 1.3 million of them, slightly more than a third, are female. AA's founding fathers initially weren't even sure women could get and stay sober in the AA program. Here's what it says about that in the book Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. Quote, "In the beginning, we could not sober up women. They were different, they said." Close quote. And even today, women and people of color in AA have to learn recovery from books written in a much earlier time, written by white men or other white men. Women, especially women, are more able to do this because we've had to do that with the majority of the earlier literature in our lifetimes. But I'm pleased that in recent decades, some recovering women have written books geared more toward helping women in recovery. Among them, there's a book called A Woman's Way Through the 12 Steps, written by Stephanie S. Covington, and it has become a recovery classic. It has helped scores of women. Its chapters on relationship and sexuality, they're worth the price of the book alone. I was a working journalist when I got sober, and during my first year or 2 in recovery, I absolutely wanted to rewrite the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought the language in there was dated at best, and that was 40 plus years ago, and I thought it was sexist at worst. I was still living a life on fast forward in those days, and I never found the free time to tackle a project of that size. I appreciate that now, because over time I have learned that everything a woman needs to stay sober is already in that big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, just as it was written. And the book, The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, has plenty to offer us women too. We just have to become open enough to receive it. If you have found anything in today's video helpful, please like and subscribe so that I can continue making them. In the next video, on October the 5th, I'll be talking about what it means to have fun while working an AA program of recovery. Until then, please always remember, recovery from alcoholism for both women and men begins with one sober hour. Keep sober. Keep sober.